Good morning, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of the PennSave 201 web conference series. I'm Rob Altenberg, and along with my co-host, Marilyn Begall, we'll be continuing our nuts and bolts review of the performance contracting process. For those of you new to this series, this is again part 2 of a 4-part series. Last week we covered how to determine if performance contracting is right for you, and this week we're going to focus more on the decision-making process and procedures. This series is produced by PennSave, which is a joint project of the Penn Future Energy Center, the Energy Services Coalition, and the Pennsylvania Energy Partnership. PennSave isn't an energy services company. Our goal is to promote energy efficiency by educating consumers about performance contracting. Just to cover some administrative details, again, for those who missed session 1, a video is available online at pennsave.org. And we're producing this for 2 audiences. There's the live web audience, and the first is the live web audience, and the second includes those watching the recording once this episode is posted. The live audience can ask questions using the chat box at the right of the screen, and we'll answer. We had some good questions the last time, and we look forward to answering as many questions as time permits. Those watching the recording can send their questions to info@pennsave.org. We'll start this session by, again, assuming you've completed the step 1 and have determined that an energy savings performance contract is a good option for financing your needed energy efficiency measures or capital improvements. Before jumping into the procedures themselves, though, it'll be valuable to lay some of the groundwork for the decision-making process. We'll provide some suggestions here, but ultimately a lot of this is going to be controlled by local procurement rules. First off, when it comes to selecting the panelists, you're probably going to want a representation from a broad range of people, including the contract signer, which could be the superintendent or other management, facilities managers, maintenance managers, financial managers, and procurement people. Sometimes attorneys are also part of the panel. That's not necessary that they're actually involved in the decision-making process, but they should be aware of the project and involved early on. In selecting the panel, again, you certainly have to comply with the local procurement rules, but you also want to involve people who know the building and care for that equipment. Beyond that, the goal is to generate a broad representation from other function areas that will be involved. While you don't want the panel to be unreasonably large, you're looking for a good mix to improve the odds that the critical points or issues are identified early and not overlooked until later on in the process. I won't cover a lot about facilitators now. Marilyn went into a lot of detail on that in session 1, so there's not a whole lot more to add. But I do want to say that it's early in the process here where you really want to make the decision whether you're going to go with a facilitator or not. Again, the earlier the facilitator is involved, the more potential you have to benefit from their experience. Going on to selecting the process, another early decision to be made is really how complex the selection process, how complex a selection process will likely be needed to identify the ESCO and narrow down, the final project. The ultimate goal here is going to be, of course, to find a way to get the best qualified contractor that's the best value. Marilyn will talk more about it later, but we are talking about the better value rather than the lowest cost, since the goal is to pay for the project out of the energy savings. The higher priced option that saves more energy could end up with a shorter payback and be overall much more beneficial. But in process selection, the goal is you're balancing the information that you obtain through the process with the complexity of the selection, process. If you're reasonably confident that your project is what your project is going to entail. Perhaps you had a recent energy audit, or maybe your staff is well versed in what the needs and the options are. You may be able to select a more streamlined procedure. For complex projects, or if you're open to a wider range of options, it's probably worthwhile to go through the full RFQ process to narrow down a list of ESCOs, and then invite the most qualified ESCOs to submit proposals as part of the RFP process. Again, this is going to be substantially more time-consuming, but it's going to provide the panel with more information based on the bidding ESCO's expertise, and it'll possibly bring to light more measures that can be considered. It's also possible that you can hold an RFQ process, select a single contractor, and effectively combine the RFP with the investment grade audit. That's another option Marilyn will cover. And we also have information provided on combining the request for qualifications and the RFP process into one single step, where you're assessing the qualifications and savings based on a set of sample measures. This is, again, a middle ground approach that still might be a good fit for less complex projects. Before Marilyn goes into detail on the RFQs and RFPs, we should probably say a few words about the process and training for the panelists. First off, it's important to have a procedure in place where each panelist is rating all of the applicants. That way, differences in the scores are not just the result of different raters. It may be possible to have financial people score financial sections and maintenance people score technical sections, splitting up the workload that way. But the more uniformity in the process, in general, that will end up with a better result. Once this general plan is set, it's usually valuable to give the team a basic background in the ECMs and some other information so they're familiar with what's likely to result from the project. Now, somebody without any technical background is still probably not going to be able to effectively review the technical approach on the final bid, but having familiarity with the process early on is very likely to avoid problems later on. In the cost and value issue, Marilyn is going to provide some more detail, but as an element of team training, the evaluation team really has to be sensitive to this issue of cost versus value rather than simply looking for the lowest cost project. The other element that's sometimes overlooked is that panelists need to feel empowered to make distinctions and give objective ratings. If a bidder is unqualified, automatically giving them half or more of the points would only complicate the selection process. Similarly, rating everybody the same, it isn't going to help in the end. I've heard of situation, I've been involved in contracting situations where raters have said that they kept the ratings very close out of fear of being sued if they said a bidder was unqualified. I mean, fears like these are things that can be addressed in the training step before the actual rating starts, and create a situation where these raters are going to feel empowered to make their selections. Having distinct scores with justified reasons for the scores early on in the process is really going to help with the results in the end. Well, I'll now hand it over to Marilyn to talk about the, well, here you go, Marilyn, to talk about identifying the qualifying ESCOs.
Okay, identifying qualifying ESCOs. We have developed a couple of processes that you want to understand and keep in mind that these are sample processes. You can use them, combine them, change them. There are sample documents on the website. But the most important thing I'd like to to do here is give you some ins and outs of the different processes to help you to choose the best for you. Once you've organized your project, you have chosen your panel, you are looking to go in to sending out your request for qualifications, your request for a proposal, or whichever document your team has chosen to use for your project. And if you're going to use the request for qualifications that goes into an RFP, you want to take a look at, when you're evaluating your request for qualifications, you need to take a look at experience. You want to take a look at the staff of the ESCO and what experience they have. You want to take a look at your project history. When you ask for project histories with like buildings in your qualifications, you want to compare the building projects that the ESCO has completed and compare it to your buildings. The management and staff style, the management of the team, the ESCOs will present in qualifications the management that would be working on that project should they get it. So you want to really take a look, did that staff that they've presented work on projects like yours? You want to look at the best providers for your project. This is what you're doing with your RFQ. And again, you're scoring comparatively. You want to compare one with the other. For instance, if you're going over your qualifications and you give an ESCO a high score, and the next response that you look at is better than the first one you looked at, then that gets the higher score. So you're comparing your responses when you score. When you get down to your scoring is done, you want to notify your ESCOs. You want to consider the number of candidates. How many proposals do you want to receive? How many requests for proposals do you want to send out? And you want to consider a couple of things here. You want to consider your evaluation panel time and resources. Your panel, of course, has other things to do. So their time is valuable, and the resources that you have for technical considerations and so on. You want to really look at what's the best number of proposals for our panel to evaluate. Then you want to look at the ESCO side of it. If you send out 5 or 6 RFPs, the ESCOs are going to know that they have a 1 in 5 or 6 chance to get that project. If you send out 3, the ESCOs are going to know they have a 1 in 3 chance to get that project. So they will give you better information. The competition is a little stiffer, so it's something to consider when you're sending out RFPs. When you have chosen your number and you're ready to send out your RFPs, you want to notify the ESCOs that are going to receive an RFP, and they will have time to prepare. So what we're looking here at is a RFQ, request for qualification, going into an RFP once your candidates are chosen to send that RFP to. Okay, go ahead, Rob. All right, you want to select your best project proposal. So you're going to develop, now you're going to develop and issue the request for proposals. When you get the proposals back and you're going to start scoring, you want evaluation training. You want to go over everything with your panel of you want it scored, what you're looking for. So like Rob said, you're going to get scores that make a difference. So you want to give them some training. Some example evaluation criteria. Let's go in a three-step system here with your request for proposal. You want to score that written proposal. And what's in that written proposal is your technical, your ECMs, how you're going to work your ECMs, what equipment they're going to use, and you're also going to receive the experience again and the project history again. So now you're kind of looking very more detailed into your qualified ESCO as far as experience, project history, and their technical capabilities for your project. You're also going to have oral interviews, or I think it's a good idea to have oral interviews. And the reason is you can score these oral interviews, and presentation really tells you a lot. You want to take a look at the team. When you do an oral interview, the ESCO is going to bring in your team, their team that's going to work on that project, and you're going to get a chance to meet them, talk to them, ask them questions, and you're going to have a final, do they fit? Can we work with these people? Is this who we want to work with? It really does help with the oral interviews. Again, your cost proposals. You're going to look at cost. You're going to look at savings. You're going to look at payback time. You want to look at the value. What are you getting for that cost and your end result? Your end result is, do I have a project here for this money that is what I wanted, what's going to give me the best function of my building? And remember, when you're going through these things, your goal here is your best project, best people, best value. So not combined lowest cost or savings. You're looking for your best value and people that you can work with. One of the things that I have often recommended is once your RFPs are scored, you have your final scoring, you want to come together with your panel, with your evaluation panel, and make a decision. Go over your scores. Are you justified in what that score is? You have a top earner of a score of an ESCO, and you want to make sure it's justified. That's why we ask panelists to write notes when they're scoring. If they've scored something high or real low, why did you do that? And then make your recommendation to your final decision maker. This is an important meeting because ideas, justifications are made, and you can be confident in your recommendation to your decision maker. Okay, Rob. Now there's another method of procuring a project, and we call it the streamline method, or RFQP, all in one together. But I wanted to give you, Rob talked a little bit about it, but I wanted to give you some considerations. Why would you use this? Why would you use this rather than your RFQ? RFQ and then going into an RFP. Because what you're going to do here is you're going to send out the RFQ and you're going to go right into an IGA. You're going to choose one ESCO. And you might want to use this because you need a shorter timeline. Some of the municipalities change supervisors or townships change supervisors. Some of the school boards are changed. So once you have a decision to go ahead and you need a shorter timeline, your schools want to do their construction in the summer. So if you get your project started and you know that you want construction in the summer, you might want to think about going right into your IGA. So a shorter timeline would be one of the reasons to use the shorter method. You have good technical resources. So you're going to have resources that will work through the IGA with your chosen ESCO. This is a good reason to go ahead with this shorter method. You have a pretty good knowledge of what type of project you want or need. This helps in guiding the ESCO. Once you've chosen the best ESCO for you, you can work with that ESCO through the IGA with developing your project. Another reason may be that you already have an energy assessment or an energy audit. So now you have information in hand that's going to help you with the decision of the ECMs that you want to go into and decide with the ESCO. Once you choose your ESCO out of this and you're going to go into an IGA, there's a lot of talk. You're going to get a lot of information, a lot of expertise from that ESCO that tell you what your best project will be. And if you have some information from an assessment or an audit, that's a great team workout for both you and the ESCO. Or you might want to use this method if you only need certain energy conservation measures. You know that your lighting needs upgraded. You know that you need some water consumption reduction. You know that you need a roof unit. So it wouldn't be a complex project. So the shorter timeline is really justified in that case. So what you want to consider here is your standard project, which might be simple ECMs, versus a complex project. If you're thinking of a complex project and you're looking for innovation, you don't actually know what ECMs could be given and could be taken care of in your building. You might want to go with the RFQ, RFP process. It's not that you won't get innovations with the other process, because your ESCO will certainly have ideas, but if you want to see them on paper, it might be up to the RFQ, RFP. And then again, of course, your complexity of your ECMs. If you've got simple ECMs, then you might want to just go ahead with this streamlined process. In this streamlined process, you may have a little longer IGA period because you will be developing at that stage. But as far as timeline goes, it's a good choice for the reasons that I've stated here. Okay, Rob. Rob? Okay.
Sorry, it took a little time there switching slides.
Okay, sorry. Okay, I just want to go over the different types. You have an RFQ, and we're calling it an RFQP because it's basically the proposal you're going to use. And the first type is just an RFQ, just qualifications. And what you want to choose here is the best fit provider. What can they bring to the table? The experience they have. You're looking at like projects in their qualifying proposal. You're looking at a good team, and I've chosen this type of process, and I can go right into the IGA with this ESCO. The other type is a qualification plus the cost savings and description on a few selected ECMs. So you want to think about your cost versus value. You're going to look at the qualifications here. If you know your ECMs, you can ask for a description of a few selected ECMs and a cost and savings. If you have someone with technical knowledge or you have a facilitator which has knowledge of approximate installation costs and equipment costs, it's nice to ask for this. Now I'm going to get into a part here. When you ask for selected ECMs, maybe you have 3, and you're asking for cost savings and description. You may tend to think that the ESCOs that are competing for this project may just send in real low cost to get the project. One thing that you can do, and I know that there's pros and cons with this, but I'm just giving you some guidelines here, is ask for a 10 or 15% cost differentiation between the proposal and the IGA. And what that's saying is, if you're proposing these costs, when you're done with the IGA, they need to be within 10 or 15% of that cost. That way you can be confident on the cost proposals that you're getting in the first stage. Just a guideline. Again, you want your best fit provider. It's your project. You can work with an ESCO once they've chosen, and if you've chosen the right fit, it's a good project. Okay, go ahead, Rob.
Okay, I was going to say, yeah, thanks, Marilyn. Decision maker approval. Okay, where are we now? Well, ideally, now we've been through the selection process, chosen an ESCO by one of the methods that Marilyn had just given details about. And we have a pretty good idea of what ECMs are going to eventually be implemented if we don't know exactly which ECMs will be implemented. So far, there have been we haven't incurred any financial obligations. The next step, or the investment grade audit, that is going to cost money. Now, typically, the cost of the audit is going to be worked into the complete cost of the project, so that won't represent a separate check that you'll have to write out. But if following the audit you decide not to proceed with the project, you'll probably be responsible for refunding that audit cost. So this is the time where we want to take a moment and verify that the project is going to do what's wanted, that it appears to be cost effective, and that we have all the information that we'll need to complete the approval process before we undertake that audit. Now, with that done, we'll be ready for the next step, which is the investment grade audit, and that is going to be discussed in the next session. We'll be discussing the IGA, contracting for services, and get into a little bit around construction and financing issues. We'd like to thank everyone again for attending this webinar this week. You can ask questions. There's a box on the right, and we had a lot of questions last week. I don't see any questions this week. So I'll give people a moment in case they have questions to ask. If there aren't any appearing online here, questions can also be sent through email to info@pennsave.org, and then we'll address any questions that we receive in the next section, or we'll respond by email or however else is appropriate. Well, still no questions on the list, so I'd like to thank everybody for attending, and we hope we'll see everybody next week. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.